Mackenzie drills it and drains away all of the life force inside Murrayfield. A dagger wedged between Scotland's ribs.
Hello and welcome to the Jackals and Tackles Rugby podcast. This is the second episode of our weekly examination of the sport we hold dear to our hearts. Today we shall be exploring the battle between Scotland and New Zealand, looking at the resurgent England after their victory over Fiji ahead of their clash with the All Blacks, discussing the heavyweight clash between South Africa and France, and exploring what could stop the Springboks, if not the French. Then looking at the games between Ireland and Japan, along with Wales against Argentina, before briefly touching on the Italian job over Australia. I'll be your host, Brendan McGilligan, and I'm joined by two guests who will give their thoughts and feelings on the weekend action. First is Henry Ellis-Brown. Nice to see you again, Henry. How's things?
Yeah, well, good. How are you?
Me, can't complain. Thanks for asking, lad. I'm looking forward to obviously getting into things. It was quite a packed weekend, wasn't
Yeah, very, very busy.
it? And my other guest is Ricky Westerby. Ricky, how are things? As I say again, it's just a shame that your name in the alphabet sadly goes behind Henry.
Don't worry, I'm not taking it personally, mate. All good. Uh, yeah, well, good. Thank you, Brendan. Good to hear you're all right.
Thank you. Thank you. So, shall I get straight into discussing the action? And as I said, we'll start at Murrayfield, where Scotland missed their chance to make history against the All Blacks. So, Ricky, do you think this was the best and only opportunity they had of ever beating the All Blacks, or what are your thoughts?
Well, 120 years, 33 games, and no wins for Scotland. And yes, I do think it was the best chance they've had in a very long time. They also the All Blacks were down to 14 for at least 30 minutes of the game, and they just couldn't capitalise. It's a shame, really, because I actually backed Scotland last week to win, and they just let me down.
Is that the only reason you're upset, or?
Well, I don't have a personal love for Scotland per se, so there we go.
No, look, I understand what you're saying. Is there anything you could maybe identify of why they failed to capitalize on it?
Well, there was the knock on, Schumann, right on the line. That was crucial. I mean, Ben White almost darted over himself. I don't know because they have a quality back line. They have a really good pack. They're just perennially on the cusp of not being in that elite tier. I think they don't have that. What's the clutch factor?
I would agree with that, considering their history against Ireland under Andy Farrell. I don't think they've ever beaten Andy Farrell. Or Gregor Townsend hasn't beat Andy Farrell anyway. Which look, their ambition is to win a Six Nations, and you need to be beating teams like Ireland and New Zealand at least occasionally to be able to do that. And anyway, what do you think? What like let's look at the All Blacks for a bit. Like we all spoke about jet lag and stuff like that. What was your thoughts on their performance after their trip from America over?
It just shows how incredible their depth is. Obviously, you compare it to Scotland, and they've got what five professional teams, whereas Scotland have got two. Like that's making such a huge difference. Obviously, with New Zealand at the same time, they had the All Blacks 15 playing against England, beating England A. So I think that's sort of the real key difference is that they're in control of their players and they can kind of manage their workloads. Whereas obviously Scotland are dependent on Premiership teams and teams in France to really sort of maintain their players, which doesn't give them the control that they necessarily need to become world beaters.
So obviously the next question was going to be how do they make that next step? Because arguably this is the best Scottish team there's ever been. How do they get to the next level?
I don't know if they can. Like if Gregor Townsend couldn't have done it over the past few years, they've had so many opportunities. They've got some of the best players in the world with Finn Russell, with Duhan van der Merwe not even playing against New Zealand. But they're such a good squad for sort of the camaraderie and sort of having gelled together. But, do they have enough strength and depth to actually get to that next level, which I just don't know whether they actually can.
Well, there's famous moments where they've dropped the ball plenty of times before, and it doesn't seem to be that they just drop the ball. Like, is there a mentality thing in the Scottish team? Because they've done it to Ireland, they've done it against England. Well, actually, to be fair, their recent record against England is pretty good, but historically it wasn't. But the thing is as Ricky kindly pointed out, 33 losses in 33 games over 120 years. Henry, like, what is the mentality thing in Scotland just that they have to be underdogs, or will they ever make that step up?
I think as it stands, sort of they're very comfortable being underdogs and sort of having that big scalp against England is kind of their big thing that they sort of strive for every year. Sort of a successful year is whether or not they've beaten England. They could lose all their other games. If they beat England, it's a success. If they don't, then it's not. I think, yeah, it's sort of the underdog sort of story is quite a good way to word it because, yeah, I think it is probably quite a big mentality thing within Scottish rugby that I don't know whether they can overcome.
Well, I'll ask Ricky. Ricky, like they've managed to beat France in France recently, which is no easy feat. They've obviously overcome England, their old enemy. They did they overcome South Africa not too long ago as well, and
Mm.
Australia.
That
So
leads me on to oh,
the
sorry,
thing
didn't
is,
mean to interrupt,
you know,
but
you're grand. You're grand.
that was
If you're wanting to obviously jump in and give me your answer before I even ask the question, go for it.
no. I just have a feeling what you might be coming onto was I saw a nice little BBC stat. Gregor Townsend is now 0-18 versus South Africa, New Zealand, and Ireland.
Right. So leading on to that, as we kind of just skirt around the question, he's been given a contract extension. Is he the man to continue at the top of the Scottish job, or do they need to move him on and think, right, there's someone else who needs to come in and fix this?
Well, I think it's as Henry said, is like you can only do so much with what you have at the grassroots and the levels going up at professional. They obviously have an incredible team, but it is strength in depth, and until they do something about that depth, which I also don't know what they could particularly do, um, I don't know. Maybe it's time to move on. It has been a while, and it's not really shown the results that they could have reached.
So would you say Franco Smith is the man to come in?
I'm not sure actually.
Really? Why? Because obviously he managed to win the URC against the odds of Glasgow. He's
Mm,
been getting a style of rugby that goes very well in Glasgow with a lot of Scottish players. I think he would be the perfect fit person if they were to move him on, but maybe you might have someone else in mind. But I don't know who they could attract, to be fair.
yeah, that's another thing is who they can actually bring in. So maybe Franco Smith, you might be right.
Well, moving on from the depression that is Scotland in general. Um, so I move on to your favourite topic, which is England between the pair of yous. So, how do you feel cheating Fiji out of a win?
I mean, it was unconvincing. What was it? 1 point ahead at half time, sort of losing most of the first half. But as we said last week, if you can win those games unconvincingly, that's kind of a sign that the team is going in the right direction. If you can sort of scrape the barrel and come away with the win, obviously we sort of predicted that England wouldn't change last week, and they did bring in quite a few more changes than we predicted. And so, maybe that disrupted the first half, but that's just coming up with excuses. I think it's promising, but it shows that there is a lot of work that still needs to be done.
It my thought though is it not seen as a positive that you're able to build a squad that come a World Cup where you've got what is it, 7 weeks, 8 weeks playing rugby continuously, that you will need players to be able to come in and play against the likes of Fiji, maybe not Fiji, but Tonga, who would be considered weaker and do a job while others recover, or to even be pushing those players for positions. Do you not need that kind of strength and depth? And England seem to be building that.
I
Henry,
think
go ahead.
definitely, like it's something that's really sort of damaged a lot of teams. So we've seen it with Ireland in the past, where it's sort of relying on a set group of players that then, you come outside of that and it's not gone well. France have done a really good job at it over the past, 8 years. And that sort of really put them in good stead coming into the World Cup, though it didn't go to plan for them. But it does prove that it's quite a valuable asset. And obviously, South Africa are leading the world by doing exactly that. And I've really liked how we sort of put second choice props as our starters, and we'll touch upon it later. But doing it again against New Zealand, it's putting real trust in those younger players and helping to bring them through. And it will put England in a much better position in 2 years' time.
And Ricky, what I'll ask you for your thoughts on Fiji more so. Like, what did you make of Fiji? Because look, the record is they've only beat England once, but they made a real kind of attempt and really kind of good effort in this one.
Yeah, a lot of power gave England a real proper test, I'd say, far better than what the Wallabies actually gave us, and that's what we needed heading into the All Blacks. Um, I feel like Borthwick was looking to experiment, and then he's kind of, I mean, had we recorded this before the team had come out, I would have said that Finn Smith would be starting on Saturday based off what we saw, but I don't know, he's completely reverted back to George Ford at 10. Um,
Okay. And what do you
so,
kind of make of that Ford decision just before we move on in terms of we could talk about it later, but I'd rather just kind of get your thoughts on it now.
well, personally, I thought Finn Smith was incredible in defence, and that against a big Fiji side like that. I think
Hmm.
that's exactly what we needed. And the All Blacks are going to be just as physical. Probably not as much as Fiji, but I think we kind of needed that player in the middle. George Ford is good defensively, but I don't know. The Wallabies game didn't particularly inspire me.
Okay, fair enough. And look, it's one of my bugbears, and maybe it's just coming from a view I see of trying to be fair between all. But what did you make of the fact that Fiji got a yellow card for a tackle in the air and England didn't?
Hmm. No comment.
No comment.
Yeah.
Henry?
I suppose you've got to kind of look at them in isolation. You can't sort of really compare and contrast them both against each other. You sort of just got to think what was going through the ref's brain at that moment in particular. It probably was there. I mean, sort of it's quite easy to jump on refereeing decisions, but realistically, when you've got the ref, you've got two assistant refs and the TMO, mistakes like that, a mistake in something actually being called or not, sort of is actually a lot rarer than people probably give credit for.
It just kind of irks with me because I sit and I look at Sam Prendergast against Fiji last season, where he threw the shoulder into a Fiji player, and it was deemed only a yellow card when it probably should have been upgraded to a red. Fiji seem to be on the end of a lot of decisions because they aren't seen as maybe a tier one nation, and that just was my opinion. I don't know whether either of you two want to weigh in on that at all.
I suppose, I mean, again, we'll come on to it later, but we've seen some other sort of big decisions being made, particularly in the France South Africa games. I don't think it's necessarily a tier one versus tier two sort of conversation, but it could just be, the style of play that Fiji goes into sort of maybe puts them in more of a dangerous situation for being carded themselves and maybe getting away with being carded or not being carded against.
Okay, fair enough. And Ricky, do you want to add anything else, or are you in agreement with Henry?
Somewhat so. I think the referees are just, they're professional. They're doing their job. I was thinking about how the Borthwick went to World Rugby previous to the Wallabies game about being in at the side. And that certainly did have some influence on the game, so I'm not sure.
Mm,
It's just because it's there's so many like little nuances to refereeing, so it's quite hard to tell.
yeah, no, that's fair. As I say, I just thought of it myself in terms of having seen a few incidences go the way of maybe bigger nations against weaker nations. But look, time to move on to maybe look. We'll move off your fun topic of England being good and potentially being Six Nations champions to something that's more dear to my heart, and the fact that I am very worried about Ireland and the state that they're in. Look, I sat and watched the whole game, and it was difficult. It was a difficult watch. Henry, you might have been looking at it with more of a smile. What do you think of Ireland Japan?
I suppose if someone asked you in 2019, a 41-10 win over Japan, you probably wouldn't be complaining too much. So, but
True.
but I think it sort of shows that I think Ireland are trying to build a bit more of a bit more of a new squad. So we've seen even with the Ireland Day game against Ireland against Spain rather, where they're sort of pinching English players with Dan Kelly. Um, but no, I think it was a bounce back that was needed. And again, it's sort of a sign that even if you can have a bad game, you can still come away with quite a healthy scoreline. But I don't really see it as too worrying individually.
Ricky, do you have anything to add before I probably give my wee 2 cents?
I was just thinking that it is Andy Farrell trying to blood in the youngsters a bit too late. I don't know if you would agree with that.
I would. I would agree with that. I also feel it doesn't help that Andy Farrell was absent for a year. Um, and I feel that it was more just contingency with what had been before because Simon Easterby never been a head coach before. Sorry, he has been a head coach at club level. My mistake with the Scarlets, but what he did was a decent job, but he was just carrying on the reins, and the only man they kind of blooded in was Sam Prendergast because he's been seen as the Messiah, which I don't understand why. Um, for me, though, Ireland went in one score up at halftime, and Japan looked relentless in attack, and they looked like they should have been probably leading that game. Ireland were disjointed and looked kind of like they hadn't played together, which a lot of them hadn't. They gave Tom Farrell a debut who performed pretty well, to be fair, but they just didn't seem to flow in the way that they had done maybe 4 years ago under Farrell, particularly in the World Cup when they looked pretty strong. Um, I feel Japan. I feel there'll be an interesting thing coming into the World Cup. I think they're building. I think they will shock someone come the World Cup. I think they look scary. They almost beat Australia a couple of weeks ago. They obviously beat Wales in Japan. So I'd say watch out for Japan. Whoever draws them in the World Cup, they will be able to kind of strike one on you. The other thing I'm worried about is Ireland got all the scores in the last 20 minutes when Japan ran out of steam. It kind of makes the scoreline look a lot stronger than what it was. I just I just don't see who's really coming through to test those players who've been around for nearly 8 years. Like I'll ask you too, who do you think could take a starting place away from those who've been around? Henry
I
first.
mean, yeah, I mean, I sort of touched upon him earlier. I think he's quite a big lost option for England, but Dan Kelly coming through, sort of gone from Leicester to Munster. I think he could be quite a scary option for Ireland if they can get him right. So it didn't work out for him in England, and England have got the likes of Seb Atkinson, and you can at 12 with Ollie Lawrence. So it's not necessarily seen as such a big loss in England, but I think he could really show why, maybe should have been given more of an opportunity.
And Ricky, do you think there's anyone, or what do you think?
What infuriates me most, I think you're in the same boat as me on this one, is the Prendergast and the Jack Crowley.
Yeah.
I'm a big Jack Crowley fan, so that infuriates me how we somewhat stunted one's development for the other, and then a complete lack of consistency. And now you've got two decent fly halves with no real international pedigree per se.
I would argue that Jack Crowley would have went on the Lions tour had he played last season. I feel that he is a versatile option like Marcus Smith, that he might have actually got the nod ahead because he was a starting international fly half in comparison. That's just a belief I might have had, but he would have had to have performed well over that year. I feel that the introduction of Sam Prendergast stopped him becoming a Lion. And that would be my view. My other view is what is to stop Harry Byrne coming in at Leinster and usurping Sam Prendergast if he performs well? Because he performed well against Spain. Now, look, I know it's only Spain, but he's a good option at 10 and he could force the issue and become a third man in there. And the issue with him, though, is he's around the same age as Jack Crowley. So, again, you're kind of a toss up between three. Is it good if a three-way battle for a number 10 spot?
Ooh, if we're thinking about England there, then mm.
So I honestly don't see it as that big of a problem, to be honest. I think sort of if you have sort of looking at it in maybe 2 years' time, you might genuinely look back and go, actually, you know, Jack Crowley was always an international standard 10. Sort of they wanted to bring Prendergast in. If you didn't bring Prendergast in last season and sort of left him sort of just on the sidelines until the World Cup, who would be the three Ireland fly halves at that World Cup? You'd have Jack Crowley, but then so if he gets injured, what position are you in?
But then the argument goes of whenever Sexton was fighting with O'Gara, he was fighting with him. He was performing week in, week out and causing a battle. You can't just turn around to Sam Prendergast and go, right, you're 20, here you go, you're our future. and take Jack Crowley out because Crowley was at the time he won a Six Nations and he had one bad performance against New Zealand and it was right, you're gone. Do you know what I mean? It's a different way. I understand your thinking, but I just think you can't because that damages the confidence of someone else just being taken straight out. Like I look at the England battle and you look at George Ford being pushed on by Finn Smith, who's performing, and Mark Smith, who's they're pushing each other on because they all realise it's a meritocracy. Whereas it doesn't feel like a meritocracy under Farrell. It feels like he's my guy, but I have to play him at the minute. Do you know what I mean? I don't know what Ricky thinks.
Yeah, the shoehorning effect as opposed to I don't know how Henry feels because of Marcus Smith being at the back of that three pile. But I think the George Ford and Finn Smith competition with the versatility of Marcus Smith is very healthy to have. And I don't know
Well,
if whether Borthwick's gone about it the right way, but is there really a right way to go about it?
probably not. But look, we could probably talk about Irish fly halves all day long. Um, to be honest,
Damn right.
let's move. Let's move on to Wales and Argentina. Now, obviously, um, big match. First match for Steve Tandy. How do you think it went, Henry?
Promising. I think even though, record score like record loss against Argentina, there was a little bit of an identity coming through, which is sort of the thing that we did mention last week, sort of saying that that was what they needed to show. It wasn't about getting the win, it was showing that, something is happening and it's not just going through the motions. Obviously, really unfortunate that Jack Morgan's now injured and he's going to miss the rest of the autumn. But it's showing that, things are happening behind the scenes and it'll be a slow process, but they'll look like they probably will get there eventually.
And Ricky, what do you make of the Argentina effort against Wales?
I was just going to say that's a bit openly optimistic from Henry there, but I think Argentina looks very good. It's just the quality of the opposition. If you put it, I was looking at the last two games of the Principality. Obviously, England was the last time they played. It's 120 points conceded. That's just slightly embarrassing.
For that being their first sport, yes, I would agree. Um, I would like to kind of ask the question of we saw the return of Lewis Rees-Zammit as well. He looked very kind of in moments incredible. The pace, the kind of fear he struck in the defense. Do you think it'll be key, Ricky, to what Wales do?
I believe so, yeah. He's put on a bit of timber as well. Like he looks more well-rounded and still got an incredible burst of pace. Um, it's only so much as how much can one man carry a team. I know they've got some incredible players, but as we just saw, Jack Morgan now out for the rest of the autumn series. There's only so much Reece Zammit can do on the wing.
Fair. Henry, you seemed obviously a lot more optimistic than Ricky. Where do they go from here? Because look, their probably destination and their kind of view is the World Cup, but they have to show something in the Six Nations. How do they do that?
I think first and foremost, I think Italy will be the big game that they've sort of got to target. If they don't win that, then it's sort of back to square one. But I think it is a lot of just sort of trusting the process, which is difficult to do. But sort of we've seen it obviously with England under Eddie Jones. It sort of was a big sort of overnight transformation. I don't think it will be that with Wales. I think it will just be a sort of keep plodding along, and the results will happen. And eventually, you'll just get to a point on the balance where things will start tipping their way. I think it is, yeah, just sort of keep plodding along. Just kind of hope you can chip away, sort of grind out those wins, sort of get the scorelines tighter, which obviously it wasn't against Argentina, and sort of just bring it closer and closer. And yeah, if it's Italy, if it's England, whoever it is, there will be one win in the Six Nations, I believe.
But how can you keep trusting the process and following along when all the background noise of a union taking away a team and there's fear over jobs and there's fear over this in Wales? Like, how can the players be like, right, I'm just going to continue doing this job while the rest of their kind of livelihood could be on the bound, like could be in the kind of hands of Welsh Rugby Union?
I think that's the problem. Obviously, like Jack Morgan's come out and basically said that he might go to R360 or Saracens or somewhere. If the Ospreys were the team that folds, I think that will be the challenge for Steve Tandy to go after. I think the only thing he can do is sort of look inward and sort of have to just cancel out any distractions outside, sort of just try to get his team to ignore it. And I think that will be quite difficult. And honestly, I don't know how a player would cope with that. But they've just got to try, I suppose.
Ricky, do you have any thoughts to add on that one?
As in for the future of the Welsh Rugby Union, or
Well, a bit of both in terms of how do you think the players will be able to perform with this kind of looming over them for the next 2 years and the future to an extent? Like, obviously, that has a huge knock on effect because of the money that comes from the Six Nations. If you're not performing, the teams will disappear that way. So it seems to be an endless cycle. So, how do they break this cycle first?
yeah, that's an incredibly difficult one because they've lost 19 out of the last 20. So that is always lingering at the back of their minds, even though it's always just ticking. And with the possible threat of relegation coming into the Six Nations as well, that's only going to demoralize, if anything. So it's quite hard to be optimistic on that front. I, yeah, I'm just glad I'm not in charge of the Welsh Rugby Union.
I was going to say, to be fair, if you had had an answer, I knew who I would have sent you your phone number to. Do you know what I mean? But anyway, look, we'll move on now for the next bit about the Goliath kind of clash between South Africa and France. So, Henry, how do you think South Africa did in that one?
I mean, they showed why they're the best in the world, didn't they? So it looks a bit tetchy going up to halftime, particularly with the red card. But they just burst away. I mean, they're playing with what was it, eight backs essentially, with Esther Hazen playing at open side, eight backs and six forwards. Like that they are proving why they're innovators and they're proving why you know they are the best. They are just a level above.
And look, the next question is pretty simple. How do you stop them?
Yeah. If I knew, I'd be coaching England.
Oh, just England, not no one else. Oh, okay, I can see where your loyalties lie. Do you know what I mean? Ricky, what did you think of the France performance? Now, look, I would say France are the strongest team in the Northern Hemisphere. You may argue England in there at the minute, but I would say France are stronger. How do you think they performed, and where do you think they need to improve to be able to reach the levels of South Africa?
So that's really difficult because I came into the game thinking that this would be like a evenly fought match, but they got absolutely destroyed at the scrum, and that was truly ridiculous. So I don't know. It's not a case of when Antoine Dupont is back because he is also, I know he's the best player in the world, but he's also just one man. Well, I saw a bit of hesitancy there.
It's tag burn, but yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Uh, I don't know because as you said, I think France are better than England as it stands right now. Uh, I don't. I just think the Springbok team was that good.
Hmm,
Like, I can't see anyone stopping them at the World Cup.
fair enough. So, do you think that they've got the kind of, I know it's the famous old saying, the World Cup cycle correct and well planned, or is it too early for them? Are they peaking too early?
The Springboks.
Yeah.
No, I think they've planned it pretty perfectly, to be fair. I saw Rassie Erasmus is now like one of the most winningest coaches of all time for South
Okay.
Africa or something like that. Yeah. There's a reason
Uh,
he's been in that job for so long. That's just because they keep ticking over and over
well,
with turnover.
I'll ask Henry. Like, look, in my opinion, or sorry, in my kind of opinion, I've seen that they have kind of revamped the coaching staff. They brought in new attack coaches to innovate a new plan. You did mention the innovation of the country in terms of the rugby. I think they've got the most players in the world, as in nationality wise. They've got the biggest pool of players that are currently playing professional rugby. Like, as Ricky mentioned around Erasmus. Why do they keep innovating? How do they keep innovating? We always speak about the All Black kind of mentality that it was always impossible to then. But how are South Africa now the leading force and the All Blacks chasing?
I suppose a lot of it is Radhi Erasmus. He's sort of become kind of the leading mind in rugby coaching at the world. Obviously, sort of a few years ago that would have been Eddie Jones. Before then, even Warren Gatland with Warren Ball. But yeah, I think sort of Erasmus has been very good at sort of keeping the ideas around him very fresh as well. He's brought in Jerry Flannery, for example, to kind of give him those new ideas and sort of sending Ninaba out and then bringing him back in, sort of kind of getting those new perspectives while he sort of remained the constant. I think it's been very important to their success.
Funny that they have two monster men leading the way, isn't it? So, moving on from the South Africa and France game, we move on to Italy and Australia. Henry, obviously, I ended up being right in terms of Italy beating Australia in my prediction. I think I was the only one to predict Italy winning, was I? What does this mean for Italian rugby moving forward?
I mean, it's promising. It's a result I arguably wanted to see. I mean, it was back-to-back wins for Italy against Australia. It's fantastic for them, sort of to be able to build that momentum. It's something that's been a long time coming, and it really shows the progress that has been built ever since Conor O'Shea came in, sort of way back when.
How do you feel about the English influence on the Italian team?
I'm a big fan of it. I wish Lewis Liner was playing for Queens and playing for England still, but can't blame him for going to his mum's country, going to the country of his birth. I think that's a real promising thing, to see those names actually turn around and go, I want to play for Italy again. I suppose staying with Quins, you got Dino Lamb and, as you mentioned, Matt Gallagher, Paolo Odogwu. I think, yeah, it sort of shows that, they are building something that players want to play for.
But whenever Ireland offer opportunities to Southern Hemisphere players, not allowed. We see where it lies. Do you know what I mean? We see how the advantage works. But anyway, no. What? So for Australia, it's quite worrying because they did look really poor. They looked shot of belief, shot of confidence. And just weeks ago, we were talking about how great they were in terms of their performance against South Africa and stuff like that. Ricky, where do Australia go from here? Because as we are talking off air, like they've now dropped to seventh in the world, which has a significant knock-on impact to the World Cup. They have to beat either Ireland or France to move back up into the top six before the World Cup draw is made. What does this mean for them?
Feels like it's one step forward and then three steps back. They've got no consistency at 10, which is a big problem.
Yeah,
And
I mean, is it five or six they've had this
Six, I
year
think.
itself?
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
worrying.
it's a big problem going forward. And let's be real, they're not based off of their first two performances against England and now Italy. I don't see them winning any of their last two games, which is a big problem.
You underestimate Ireland's ability to field.
I
Do you know
feel
what I
like
mean?
they'll. I know we're doing predictions later, but I do have a feeling something might be in the offing there for Ireland.
I feel Joe Schmidt has a plan. I feel he's lying in the long grass waiting for Andy Farrell. I feel he's waiting. As I say, we'll do the predictions later. But look, Australia, it's a bit concerning. But moving kind of forward to the World Cup off that, we look at the kind of qualification process in terms of what's happening in the Middle East at the minute. Now, obviously, I think Henry and Ricky and myself all predicted Samoa to beat Brazil. Are we kind of not surprised by that at all? No.
I mean, yeah, it
It
was
it was
quite
inevitable.
obvious.
However, we did kind of predict Namibia to be the ones challenging. They were beaten by 7 points to Belgium. Ricky, what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, that's just incredible, isn't it? Uh, did not see that one coming, and it makes for a really exciting tournament going forward. I don't think that Samoa will be beaten going by Belgium, but it makes for a bit more competition, you know?
And Henry, what do you think? Because this week the teams playing, so it's on Thursday. We've got Belgium versus Brazil, so they could win a second game. Whereas Samoa are playing Namibia. It could line up a last kind of winner takes all in the final game between Belgium and Samoa. So how do you feel about that, Henry?
It does show sort of how strong the Rugby Europe Championship is. Obviously, we've spoken and sort of touched upon it earlier, sort of saying that Georgia are sort of knocking on the door of the Six Nations, but that they've brought everyone else up around them. And I think it shows also by contrast sort of what a lack of competitions had on Namibia. So they've obviously Zimbabwe have sort of come on and sort of taken that Africa one spot, and yeah, so Namibia have sort of just been left to kind of wallow, and they've been unable to improve for several reasons, including their own issues with their governments. But yeah, it's kind of quite worrying now for them.
Well, the thing is I kind of look at the friendlies that were played over the weekend, and I look at Georgia and the USA. I saw the post from the USA on their social medias after when we fought and battled hard. Still lost by 13 points, 43-30. I don't know if Georgia were a wee bit more lackadaisical in regards to that. Because obviously wins over this break helps their draw for the World Cup. Um, but in the USA last week, we were speaking about our concerns for the USA with the World Cup going there after Australia. Another team folded during the week in was it Ohio, which is a strong Pacific Island area for players to kind of go and live.
The Utah
Are we
Warriors,
worried?
wasn't
Yeah, yeah,
it?
yeah.
Utah.
Are we worried about the USA, even though they try to seem to be putting on a positive spin on the national scene, or is the World Cup there a huge concern moving forward, Ricky?
Well, I do think as part of a comms team, you're meant to spin out of anything that's terrible. So there's
There's
got to
no,
be
no
some optimism there.
there's no need to be no need to be professional at this minute in time, Ricky. But
Oh yeah.
what do you think?
Well, I think the MLR is in big trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, we knew that before this, but I actually didn't know that the Utah team had floated, which is another major blow, really, because those players will just go elsewhere, and it just doesn't help the competition in America. It's a shame.
How did they develop the players? Because I was listening to Eddie O'Sullivan talking about it because he's working over there in one of the colleges, and he speaks about how college rugby is really good and it's a good standard, but once they leave, they've nowhere to go to play rugby professionally. How do they bridge that gap so they can develop the players? Because he was speaking about maybe they need to adapt the Argentinian tactics of the early 2000s, which was to send all their players to France to develop at professional level. I think that door's closed now. I think where do they go, Henry? What do you do to develop kind of American rugby, particularly with the World Cup coming up? They've only got what is it, 6 years to develop a team that's kind of competitive to inspire a nation.
I actually think they're probably going about it the most sensible way. Like we've seen since the MLR came up that they're now starting to build sort of a wider squad of professionals, whereas before it was always you might have the odd player like Todd Clever that sort of is that international standard, is that sort of tier one level player, and then sort of everyone else is sort of playing semi-pro, just playing in the park on the weekend, and they are now sort of creating that core of MLR players, and obviously we've seen it with Canada, and then the Canadian team sort of dissolved, and it sort of became a bit of a mess for them. But I think with America, they are actually building. Obviously, the Scotland game was a bit of a blip. They didn't have all their star players from outside the MLR, so that sort of shows that there is still a long way to go for the league. But I think concentrating all the talent into what was it now 5 teams probably isn't ideal, but could quite help them in a lot of ways, to be honest, because it means that you get the best of the rest talent sort of all sort of playing together, building each other up at a decent level.
But if you don't have the teams to compete in the league to make it competitive with only 5 teams, really, how much development can they make in that regard as well?
I think that's the problem is then sort of working out what the perfect level of competitiveness and sort of the level of the competition versus and what will be sustainable versus actually sort of what what would be sustainable. And I think maybe 8 teams would be ideal for sort of building up the best players, but it's not going to be the best level of competition. And I'd love to see a 32 team sort of NFL style league that'd be brilliant to see, but it is not going to happen. I think
There's
they
not
just
enough
sort of
quality.
yeah, I think they've just got to play it by ear at this point. They're at quite a big crossroads that you've got to kind of view the MLR as separate from the USA Rugby, and it's almost USA Rugby are now looking at the MLR as a development tool rather than sort of just another entity in the same country.
And just because you mentioned Canada, I'll ask Ricky, is there anything to take from Romania's win of 31-21 over Canada? Anything to take at all, or should we just quickly sweep past it?
Not particularly from my side, but can I jump in and quickly on the what we were talking about quick?
You
Um,
may go for it.
I, I was just thinking about how you said the Argentina model, and how what the US women's national team have done with the majority of their players overseas and a lot in the PWR, which is obviously the best league in women's professional rugby. And they have a fairly good team. They're always competing in the top four, aren't they? So it's not the worst model to go after.
But the question is where do they send them? Like, I don't want to. I don't. As I mentioned earlier, the largest pool of international players, just in general, is South Africa. Like, would you rather take a South African or an American if you're a professional club and you're only allowed three foreign players or however many foreign players on your kind of roster?
It's a good point. I was just thinking maybe this might be laughed at, but Champ Rugby might be a good destination for a lot of American players that then look to push up into the Prem. 'Cause there are
Are
some
you?
good
Are you?
teams and there are some good teams in the Champ. I remember Ealing took on some American players before.
Well, I fully agree with you, but the only thing is, my issue with that is the Premiership have to start allowing relegation and promotion again, because otherwise there'll never be a pathway for them to reach the highest level if that was the case. Because I just feel the registration rules at the minute are quite limiting around the world. Because as I say, when you can only register so many foreigners in France and stuff like that, it does inhibit their development if they wanted to follow that model, if you get me.
I
Yeah,
know
good
it's
point, actually.
I know it's unorthodox, but sort of had an idea which I don't think would ever happen, but could work quite well. Is what if World Rugby sort of got in and said Super Rugby Americas and the MLR become one league as almost like two conferences, and then they USA could do what Argentina are now doing, where Argentina have got what 4 or 5 teams in Super Rugby Americas building up their talent, and now we're seeing it with the likes of like Boris Wenger going off to Harlequins, for example, sort of players that have really earned their stripes at that level, sort of become full-fledged internationals, and then proving actually we can get contracts in Europe and around the world. I think maybe that could be a way forward.
No, I can see that being an option, but the issue would then be the finance behind travel, the finance behind all this in a sport that's already kind of struggling financially. I think that is a solution, but then you have to work around all that as well. And that's why I'm just saying it's a near nigh impossible question at the minute of how do you develop it. But anyway, moving off this depressing topic, um, we shall move on to the last kind of friendly result, which of note was Portugal against Uruguay, which was 26-8 to Uruguay. Are we worried about Portugal because they got an absolute hammering by Ireland? They're now seemingly not able to compete against teams their level. They're going into the World Cup after coming off a great result against Fiji in the last one. What do we like? I've obviously heard a lot of stuff about the Portuguese Union and a lot of discontent and stuff within it. Like, are Portugal just disappearing off the kind of face of rugby at the minute?
I wonder whether we're sort of putting too much pressure on Portugal to begin with. Obviously, it's their first World Cup for however long that they'd even qualified for in 2023, and that they'll be at the next one, and sort of maybe they are just sort of slowly developing. That Uruguay have become quite regular at World Cup, so on paper probably should expect that they should be beating them. So yeah, I just wonder whether it's just sort of you need to give them a bit more time to sort of settle down. Yeah, they get the odd scrap and sort of the Fiji games are one off, but day to day, they I think they just need some time.
Fair enough. And Ricky, have you got us anything
I do,
now, or should we move on?
uh, I do think that the one counterpoint to that is that there is not much time.
Yeah, there's what 18 months nearly, 2 years nearly as a max. for the World Cup?
Yes.
Yeah,
It will be around that, wouldn't it? So
yeah. So moving on to predictions to an extent. I kind of want to start with the biggest game, and this is my opinion. Look, I know you're England fans, but I'm not going to start there. I'm going to start with Wales versus Japan. Now, we spoke about this ourselves in terms of why this is such a massive game. We spoke about the world rankings. Now, Wales sitting 12th, Japan sit 13th. This will have a massive impact on the world rankings going into the World Cup draw. Ricky, what do you think about this game?
I think it's from a neutral perspective, it's actually a real popcorn. Sit down and have some popcorn and watch the game because it could be incredible. Uh, or that could be the opposite. We could be setting ourselves up for absolute failure there. Uh, I think the excitement of the qualification is there, but I don't think Wales will rise to the occasion per se, and I think Japan will take it,
So you think
boosting their World Cup. Yeah,
you think Wales will get given another grip of death, as they always seem to be given grips of death?
I genuinely cannot see any other way around it. I
But
don't know.
their one win in 20 was against Japan. Come on, man.
I was encouraged by Japan's performance against Ireland, so there you go.
I wouldn't be that
Counted.
encouraged. um, but Henry, what do you think? What do you think of the Wales Japan game?
I think yeah, it will be a real sign of where both teams are actually. I think if Japan can, get the win, it probably would be an upset maybe. I think sort of that they are two teams that are probably at the same level. I think if Eddie Jones can mastermind this win, they're one win each in the summer, then I think it'll be a real promising sign for where they're going forwards. But if Wales can get the win, it will show that there is actual progress and they are creating something. And it will be a completely different sort of game plan, everything to what we saw in the summer under Matt Sherratt and Danny Wilson. But it could swing either way. I'm probably leaning towards Japan slightly. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that wasn't that unreasonable.
every 5 seconds, I'll go, actually, Wales could do it. Actually, Japan could do it. But I think it will be a very close game. It'll be a very, very entertaining game. It won't be vintage rugby, but I think it'll be sort of the kind of thing that we all love to watch.
Okay, I'm going for a straight. All three of us saying that Japan will win. To be honest, I do think I agree with Ricky. I think that the signs they showed against Ireland, if they don't run out of steam, they should easily beat Wales. And I think easily beat Wales. I think Wales might rope them in near the end, but that's kind of giving Wales too much credit. I think at this stage, with only their second game under Steve Candy, he's probably still getting used to the way he approaches things. Um, but yeah, that would be my view. So look, we'll have Wales and Japan. Japan to win, yeah,
Three,
Sounds good
all
to
three, I
me.
think. Oof,
that's grand.
it's going to
Other
come back to
match.
bite.
The next match that we'll talk about is England v New Zealand. So I don't know where to start where you used to on this one. Who's more likely to not like England? Um,
That's
Ricky,
actually difficult.
Ricky, England v New Zealand. Who do you think?
Mm, heart is with England. My brain is telling me New Zealand, even though they, it's tough, isn't it? It wasn't an overall convincing performance against Scotland by any stretch. Like there was clear flaws to be explored. Ex I can't even think.
Exploited.
That's the word. Thank you. Um, yeah, but Borthwick's reverted to George Ford at 10. There's not the consistency that I thought he would be going into this game. Not, I'm going to say New Zealand.
Okay, Henry.
Exactly what Ricky said with sort of heart saying England, head saying New Zealand. I think if if England can sort of avoid doing what Scotland did and sort of keep New Zealand at a bit of an arm's length, then I think that there will be within a shout. I think it will be a very entertaining game. I've seen a lot of England fans sort of saying, "No, I'm kind of feeling it. I think that it might be brewing here." I think that might just be sort of getting carried away with what is it, nine wins in a row England are on at the moment. But yeah, it's really tough. I think New Zealand, but I'm just so glad that Scotland didn't beat them last week because if they did, it would be an absolute whitewash. It would be a complete bloodbath, and New Zealand would be running away with it.
So you've not given me a result. Who do you think will win?
I think New Zealand, but yeah, I don't want to say that.
God, right. Okay, so we've got two for New Zealand. I genuinely, as much as I hate to say it, I think England will win. You've got a history of beating them at Twickenham. You are performing really well at the minute. I know obviously you're a bit jaded last weekend, but you had some changes made. I think the style of rugby you're playing, I've seen South Africa exploit New Zealand with that. And I just think that you will be able to get over the line. I think, as you mentioned with Scotland, like the came so close because New Zealand were down, but New Zealand are such a ill-disciplined team. You'll have the same advantage, I reckon, at some stage. I just reckon that you will do it, especially at home. I think if this was a World Cup game, yeah, New Zealand would be my go-to, or New Zealand. But I feel that you will do it. I know the overall thing says New Zealand with used to, but I think just thinking about it, England. And look, I'll be happy if I'm wrong. That's the thing.
So will I.
So we're
Yeah, I
going.
think the same applies to us as well. We'll be happy if we're wrong.
So the next biggest game, I would argue, is Ireland Australia. So Henry, what do you think about Ireland Australia?
I think, yeah, if with the way Australia are playing at the moment, it should be an Ireland win. Obviously, it was half the Ireland squad that played them for the Lions over the summer. So they've got a history, they've got form of getting those wins against Australia. It's a familiar foe in a lot of ways. And yeah, I think Australia aren't playing good enough rugby to warrant being backed in this situation.
Okay, so you're going Ireland. Ricky?
Stuck in a weird one, this one. Two teams not in particularly good form whatsoever. Uh, I want to say Ireland.
Okay, fair. Why?
But just because of the Wallabies not actually showing up and that inconsistency at 10 that we talked about is quite easy to target now. And I just think Ireland will finally turn up for a game for this one.
Okay. And look, whenever you got the best player in the world and Tag Burn starting, everything's all right. But the thing is I think it will be a lot closer than many expect. I think Ireland will do it within a score. I think Schmidt will have a plan, but like we've talked about before, I think there's a limitation to what Australia can do in terms of their depth, their pool of players, and I just think as you talk about their number 10 situation, like you need that to be consistent. Now, look, obviously Ireland, it's kind of ironic to say that from an Irish point of view. Um, but the thing is, I feel that there's more consistency there, and the other players around that works out. I think an important player to come back is actually Stuart McCluskey. So we'll do it 12. I think he'll be very important if he's fit. But yeah, I want to say Ireland will win that just by the skin of their teeth, though. So we're going with an Irish win there. Uh, next one. France Fiji. What do we think, Henry?
Yeah, I mean, France sort of came off the boil a bit last week, but I don't think they'll have too many problems against Fiji. Fiji have caused problems against France over the past few years, but I think yeah, France will be looking to respond, and I don't think they're going to sort of let up against Fiji.
And Ricky.
Yeah, Fabien Gaultier was complaining that they'd only had one game together compared to South Africa's 10. Now that they've had that game, they'll be raring to go, and I think they will absolutely beat the wheels off them.
Fair enough. I would agree exactly with what Ricky's just said. I think France will win it pretty handily. Henry, obviously you said the same, but yeah. Um, Next big one, Italy v South Africa. Obviously, this is the test for Erasmus this tour. What do we think, Henry?
I think if Italy can do that, just crown the world champions like that, that will be absolutely generational. That will go down as one of the greatest games that ever happened. I can't see South Africa losing. I think, I'd be excited to see what his lineup will be. I think that there could be probably a few surprises, but yeah, I think South Africa by quite a bit.
Do you think he'll predict the Italian lineup like he did with the French one?
Well, wasn't the French one? It was actually like leaked in French media like days before, and he sort of just took the glory because no one read it in French.
Yeah, yeah, that seems about accurate. But Ricky,
Definitely what happened.
what do you think, Ricky?
uh, yeah, it's not really a difficult one, this one. That was an emphatic performance like against the French.
Yeah,
I just there's just no other. It was pretty like impressive. 42 minutes down to 14 and actually beating a side as good as the French. I know the rust and stuff, but yeah, there's no way that Italy win. It would be incredible.
I just think he'll rotate the squad for the Italy match, being completely honest, because he's got the Irish next week, and I
Mm,
think he wants to batter the Irish. I really do. I know he hates the Irish with a passion, so I reckon it'll be closer for Italy than many are thinking. I still think they'll win by about 2 or 3 scores, but I think it will be closer because I just think he is waiting to put Ireland and their fans and Andy Farrell in their place and be like, look, get back in your wee pen. You aren't the best in the world. And that's kind of my taking from it. Do you know what I mean? Because Ireland screamed loud when we won one game and drew one each in South Africa. So he wants to shut them up royally. And finally, Scotland v Argentina. Ricky, I'll start with you.
hmm. Oh, I said Scotland last week and they let me down. Um,
Don't let that cloud your judgment. It was New
oh, it
Zealand.
is. It is. Yeah. But they could have won. That's the most annoying point. Uh, I'm gonna say Scotland again. I just have a
Okay.
feeling that they'll be really, really annoyed with not winning that game.
And
Argentina are
Henry.
a very good side. But yeah,
Sorry, go
sorry.
ahead.
Yeah, no, no, you're good. You're good. That was my closing argument.
And Henry, sorry.
I think it's quite easy to underestimate Argentina, and they've grown into being a real, genuinely tier one world class side. I think again it'll be another close game. I think Scotland have maybe played their World Cup final, sort of so to speak, but I think it will be slightly siding to Argentina. We also got 8 minutes.
No problem.
Should,
For me, personally, I feel that I would have said that Argentina would have rested their players because England would be a bigger game next week. Because I believe they're playing England next week. Yes, am I correct?
yeah.
My only thing is when we talk about the world rankings, if they secure a win against Scotland, they finish in the top six. Would they risk putting it into jeopardy against England, having rested players? Or would they go, look, just get this done. We'll see England another day, even though they probably want revenge after the summer. I personally think they'll go all out against Scotland, and I think they'll beat Scotland. And then they might rest. They'll see who's wounded and who's ready to fight again against England. But I reckon England could probably walk next week that game. But I feel Argentina will win this, and I feel they'll scare Scotland quite heavily. Now, the only interesting thing I've noticed is obviously the top 12 teams already qualified for World Cup, along with the next four. So the top 16 have qualified for World Cup already. 17th in the world is Samoa. Now, obviously, they could conceivably not qualify, but do we think that they will? Do we think it's just in the bag for them?
Wouldn't say in the bag, but it's theirs to lose.
Okay, because then that would kind of wrap up the world rankings of basically the top 18 of the 24 teams in the world are kind of qualifying for the World Cup, which would justify the world rankings in the sport, which you can't say the same for football to an extent. But look, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Henry. Thank you very much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
And Ricky, same to you.
Always a pleasure, mate. Thank you.
Well, look, to everyone who's listening to the podcast, we thank you for listening, and any likes or follows is always appreciated, and any sharing would be greatly appreciated as well. Until next time, when we look to go over our predictions and see just how wrong we were, we'll let you be and enjoy whatever you're up to. Goodbye.